By the year 2000, the PlayStation was entering the twilight of its life. Developers had spent years mastering its quirks, and some studios were determined to squeeze every last drop of performance out of Sony's little grey box. One such effort was Destruction Derby Raw, the third and final entry in Psygnosis' vehicular Wreckfest series. Released late in the PS1's life, Raw promised bigger crashes, deeper modes, and improved visuals. But behind the chaos was a technical balancing act, full of clever tricks, compromises, and, yes, a few rough edges. The story of Raw begins 5 years earlier, with the original Destruction Derby. That game was a revelation in 1995. While most early PS1 races focused on speed and clean driving lines, Reflections Interactive built something different, an arena where crashes weren't accidents, they were the whole point. The damage model, crude by today's standards, was groundbreaking at the time. Cars visibly bent, performance degraded, and matches became as much about survival as winning. Destruction Derby 2 followed in 1996, adding new tracks, ramps, and improved visuals. It leaned more into arcade fun, but it was clear the formula was evolving only slowly. By the time Raw arrived, the task had been handed over to Studio 33. Their job wasn't just to deliver more of the same. It was to modernize the franchise and prove the PS1 could still handle something spectacular even as the PlayStation 2 stole the headlines. Studio 33's ambition was simple in words but complex in execution: make the biggest, most chaotic Destruction Derby yet. That meant more simultaneous cars, more visual detail, more sparks, more smoke, more everything. The PS1, however, had serious limitations. Its CPU was a 33 MHz MIPS processor without native floating point support. Physics calculations had to be faked or heavily simplified. Instead of simulating real-time metal deformation, cars were designed with preset damage states: front bumpers bent in 3 steps, doors crumpled in 4. Hit a threshold, and the next model swapped in. It created the illusion of dynamic damage without the computational cost. The same applied to particle effects. Sparks weren't individual physics-based lights, they were clusters of flat textures triggered by collision scripts. Smoke plumes looped short animations rather than being generated dynamically. Clever tricks, but ones that gave the impression of a game bursting at the seams. Still, these shortcuts came at a cost. Frame rates could plummet into the teens during big pile-ups, and collision boxes sometimes misaligned, leading to bizarre outcomes, like being launched sky-high from a seemingly minor nudge. Raw expanded the series with more tracks, more arenas, and additional event types. Beyond the traditional demolition derbies and stock car races, it introduced stunts, last man standing modes, and endurance challenges. From a technical angle, these modes highlighted the game's engine limits. Standard races were fine, but throw 20 cars into a confined bowl arena and the PlayStation started to buckle, frame rates dipped, clipping bugs appeared, and AI vehicles sometimes spun wildly from miscalculated impacts. Still, these rough edges almost became part of the charm. Raw wasn't clean or polished, it was carnage. Let's be honest, Raw is as famous for its quirks as for its content. Push the engine too far, and the scene started to show. Object culling, debris often vanished mid-air, sacrificed by the system's aggressive memory management. If too many objects filled the screen, the less important one simply blinked out. Collision logic: in big pile-ups, the game sometimes awarded crash points to the wrong driver. You'd slam an opponent head-on, only for someone 3 cars away to get the credit. The flying car bug: certain ramps or impacts could confuse the physics routines, launching cars skyward like rockets. Studio 33's workaround was clever but crude: invisible walls placed around arenas to bounce runaway cars back into play. AA quirks: bots occasionally failed to recover from spin-outs, endlessly circling or driving straight into walls until eliminated. These issues could frustrate, but they also added to the game's unpredictable charm. And remember, this was 2000. There were no post-launch patches, no day one fixes. Developers had to ship what they had, warts and all. Graphically, Raw was pushing right at the edge of what the PS1 could handle. Cars had higher polygon counts than in DD2, textures were sharper, and sparks illuminated arenas with energy. Car deformation was more exaggerated, giving pile-ups a satisfying crunch. But PS1 limitations were always present. Texture warping, the console's notorious quirk, was impossible to fully hide. Long draw distances often suffered from pop-in, particularly on the larger racetracks. And while lighting effects were improved, they were still faked, using bright textures rather than true dynamic lights. What's striking today is how colorful and readable the game remains. Where many late PS1 races now look muddy, Raw's bold arenas and exaggerated damage states still carry a cartoony, arcade-like charm. If visuals carried the chaos, sound sealed the atmosphere. Raw's audio mix was aggressive, prioritizing crunching metal and crowd reactions over subtlety. The soundtrack leaned on heavy riffs and drum loops, clearly designed to keep adrenaline pumping. On the technical side, the PS1's audio compression was stretched hard. Developers had to carefully budget memory, assigning more clarity to important sound effects like crashes, while ambient noise often used lower quality samples. This gave impacts a weighty, visceral feel, even if background audio occasionally sounded tinny. It's worth noting that some fans still rank Raw's soundtrack as the best in the series, because it captured the reckless spirit of demolition better than its predecessors. When Raw released in November 2000, the PlayStation 2 had already launched. That timing was brutal. Audiences were dazzled by Tekken Tag Tournament, Ridge Racer V, and SSX, all showing what next-gen could do. Against that backdrop, Raw felt dated, no matter how ambitious. Critics were split. Some praised the sheer spectacle, the expanded modes, and the bigger crashes. Others pointed to the uneven frame rate, the lack of polish, and the feeling that the series hadn't truly evolved since 1995. Sales reflected that mixed reception. While the original Destruction Derby had been a million seller, Raw sold modestly, appealing mainly to loyal fans. Within a year, Psygnosis itself had been restructured into Sony's internal studios, and the Destruction Derby name was quietly retired. Today, Destruction Derby Raw lives in that strange category of late PS1 curiosities. It wasn't the best-selling racer, nor the smoothest, but it represents a moment where developers were still learning how far they could push hardware that was, by then, 5 years old. Its DNA can be traced forward. Games like Flatout, Burnout 3, and Wreckfest all built on the idea that crashes could be the star of the show. The spectacle, the unpredictability, the joy of smashing cars together, that spirit began with Destruction Derby and found one of its most chaotic expressions in Raw. So when you look back at this game today, don't just see the bugs or the slowdown. See the ambition. See the developers testing the limits of their tools, faking physics with clever tricks, and delivering a game that embraced the crash like no other. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Destruction Derby Raw on the PlayStation. A game that dared to take chaos, amplify it, and give players an experience that was part racing, part survival, and entirely unforgettable. Whether you remember it for the sheer thrill of the pile-ups, the technical wizardry that squeezed every ounce out of the PS1's hardware, or the legacy it left behind in the arcade racing genre, there's no denying it carved out its own identity in a crowded field. If you enjoyed this retrospective, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps more fans of retro gaming find the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we've got plenty more deep dives into the classics coming your way, each with the same mix of history, technical insights, and nostalgia. And I'd love to hear from you. Did Destruction Derby Raw stick in your memory? Do you have a favorite track, mode, or crash that stands out above the rest? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all and they often help shape future videos. Until next time, this has been No Drama Llama Gaming. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next retrospective.